All right, Reddit, tell me if I'm losing my mind here, because the whiplash from the last 24 hours is about to snap my neck. Mark, the guy I've been seeing for 6 months, and yes, he was great. Stable, kind, the whole package. Just ended things with me in a way that feels so disproportionately dramatic. I feel like I'm in a badly written play. And it all hinges on one, single, undeniable fact that he's conveniently ignoring. We were not officially boyfriend and girlfriend. Let me repeat that, because it's the most important detail in this whole mess. No labels, no promises, no DTR define the relationship talk. In the unwritten constitution of modern dating, that's Article 1, Section 1. Until words are spoken, you are in a gray area. It's not sneaky, it's just the default setting. And because of this beautiful, glorious gray area, I thought a single, stupid, tequila-fueled kiss at a loud party was just that. A stupid mistake, a blip, something you cringe about, apologize for, and move on from. But for Mark, oh no, for him this was a capital offense, a grand betrayal. He's acting as if I didn't just stumble, but purposefully took a sledgehammer to the foundations of our life together. The life we hadn't even agreed to build yet. Now I'm blocked on every platform known to man, left to stare at my ceiling and wonder how he could be so biblical about this. So please, someone, tell me I'm not crazy. He's the one being unreasonable, right? He can't just retroactively apply boyfriend rules to a seeing each other situation. That's not fair. Don't get me wrong, for the past 6 months, Mark was a great guy. A really great guy, in that dependable, golden retriever sort of way that romance novels promise. He remembered I hated cilantro. He'd send me links to obscure documentaries he thought I'd find interesting. And he always did what he said he was going to do. His life was a neat, orderly spreadsheet, and for a while I found that deeply comforting. But that was also the problem. His stability sometimes felt like a silent judgment on my own more chaotic, spontaneous approach to life. Mark's world was entirely black and white, with no room for nuance, and his defining characteristic was being principled. Overly principled. I remember once we were supposed to meet his oldest friends for dinner at a place he'd booked a month in advance. My Uber got stuck in crosstown traffic, and I walked in exactly 10 minutes late. You would have thought I'd spit on the birthday cake. He wasn't yelling, Mark never yelled, but he got this tight, disappointed look around his mouth, this palpable aura of disapproval. He stood up, gave me a stiff kiss on the cheek, and spent the next 20 minutes apologizing for me to the table. Kendra's had a crazy day, he'd say, making me feel less like his partner and more like a wayward child he had to manage. Another time, I casually mentioned I'd pick up his favorite expensive coffee beans on my way home. I got slammed with a last-minute deadline, and it completely slipped my mind. That evening was chilly. The next day was chilly. Finally, he sat me down and gave me this gentle, infuriating lecture. It's not about the coffee, Kendra. It's about the small promises. They're the foundation of trust. If the small ones can't be relied upon, what does that say about the big ones? Over a $10 bag of coffee. I saw these things as quirks, these little rigidities that were part of the Mark package. I never, ever saw them for what they were, the non-negotiable, load-bearing walls of his entire moral code. And then there was Julian. He works in Mark's marketing department. Where Mark was quiet and deliberate, Julian was electric. The first time I met him at some stuffy work happy hour, we fell into this effortless, rapid-fire banter about a terrible Netflix show we both secretly loved. He had this way of looking at you when you talked that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He was a sparkler. Being with Mark was like sitting by a warm, steady fireplace. Being with Julian was like a shot of espresso to the system, a jolt of bright, exciting energy. It wasn't a threat to the fireplace. It was just different, a different flavor of social interaction. And I, being a human woman who enjoys feeling clever and desired, filed it all under harmless fun. It was a pleasant distraction, nothing more. The whole thing went down at Mark's company's annual awards gala. It was one of those painfully corporate events held in a soulless hotel ballroom with lukewarm Chardonnay and a sea of men in identical gray suits. Mark, naturally, was in his element. He was on the fast track to a promotion, and he navigated the room like a shark, all polite smiles and firm handshakes. He spent the first hour diligently networking with VPs, his posture perfect. I was playing the role of the supportive, smiling plus one, nodding along to conversations about quarterly earnings and supply chain logistics, and I was so bored I could feel my soul starting to atrophy. I spotted Julian across the room. He wasn't networking. He was holding court with a group of younger, more animated colleagues, laughing with his whole body. He caught my eye over the rim of his glass and gave me a little wave, a silent, conspiratorial invitation to escape the tedium. I gave Mark a quick peck on the cheek. "Going to get another drink?" I murmured into his ear. He just nodded distractedly, his eyes already scanning the room for his next strategic conversation. He was working. I understood that. But in that moment, I felt less like his date and more like an accessory he'd remembered to bring, like a tie clip or a nice watch. The moment I joined Julian's circle, the night's color palette shifted from grayscale to technicolor. The wine suddenly tasted better. The jokes were sharper. Julian had this incredible talent for making you feel like the most interesting person in the room. He'd ask a question and then actually listen to the answer, his eyes locked on yours. He playfully teased me about my very serious date, making me feel like I was part of a secret, fun rebellion. The tequila shots started appearing, passed around by a laughing junior associate. One, then two. I was laughing, loud and unrestrained, a version of myself I hadn't been all night. My internal monologue, fueled by alcohol and a craving for attention, was humming with a chorus of justifications. This is just harmless fun. Mark is too serious anyway, he needs to loosen up. He needs to see I have a life outside of him, that other people find me interesting. Besides, we aren't even official, for God's sake. I am technically a free agent. Each thought was another brick in the wall I was building around my impending bad decision. Later, the group migrated to a small, quieter alcove overlooking the glittering city lights. Mark was nowhere to be seen, probably deep in a handshake with the CEO himself. Julian and I were standing close, the alcohol buzzing pleasantly in my veins, the murmur of the party a distant hum. He was telling me a story about a disastrous client pitch, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back. It was a simple, casual gesture, but it sent a jolt of electricity through my whole body. And then he leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You're way too much fun to be stuck with Mr. Corporate all night." And that was it. That was the green light my drunk, validation-seeking, ego-driven brain needed. I remember thinking, with the kind of crystal-clear logic only a drunk person can possess, this doesn't count. It's a party. It's a joke. It's not real life. It's a loophole. And I leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't a long, passionate movie kiss. It was quick, messy, and tasted of tequila and lime. It was a stupid, impulsive, meaningless mistake. As soon as our lips parted, a tiny, sober part of my brain screamed, "Oh, that was a catastrophic error." But the rest of me, the part that was high on feeling desired and rebelling against the boredom, just pushed that voice down, down, down. It was a technicality, a blip. It meant nothing. The next morning, the silence was the first sign something was wrong. Mark's usual 7 a.m. "good morning" text, the one that had become a small, reliable cornerstone of my daily routine, never arrived. My head was pounding, a dull, throbbing echo of last night's bad decisions, and the absence of his message felt louder than an air horn. I was scrolling through my phone, trying to craft a casual, breezy text that would test the waters, when a message from him finally popped up. It wasn't a smiley face, it was 3 stark words: "We need to talk." My stomach didn't just drop, it plummeted. I immediately suggested a coffee shop, a neutral, public territory where I figured I could manage the narrative, charm my way out of it over the sound of a milk frother. He replied almost instantly, "No, I'll come to your place, 1 p.m. The bluntness, the rejection of my attempt to control the setting, sent a genuine chill down my spine. I spent the next few hours in a frenzy of preemptive damage control, pacing my apartment and rehearsing my lines like a lawyer preparing for trial. It was a joke, a stupid party trick. Julian was the aggressor, he was flirty with everyone. I was drunk, barely remember it. And most importantly, the ace up my sleeve, the argument I believed was irrefutable. We weren't even official. I was utterly convinced I could deploy this piece of logic and he'd have to concede. He'd be annoyed, sure, but he'd see it as a minor infraction, a technical foul, not a gay mending one. When he knocked on my door at 1 p.m. on the dot, He looked hollowed out. All the warmth and easygoing light was gone from his eyes, replaced by a flat, gray exhaustion. There was no anger, no shouting, just a profound and terrifying calm that was more unsettling than any rage could ever be. This was not the Mark I knew. He didn't sit down when I gestured to the sofa. He just stood in the middle of my living room, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, a stranger in a familiar space. "Someone from work, a friend, told me they saw you and Julian last night," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of inflection, like he was reading a weather report. "They said you kissed him." It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact, and it blew all my prepared remarks to smithereens. "Mark, it was nothing," I stammered, my voice sounding weak and pathetic even to my own ears. I was so drunk, the party was so boring. It was just a stupid, meaningless joke. "Was it?" he interrupted, his voice still unnervingly quiet, cutting through my babbling. This was my moment. I had to make him see the logic. I took a breath and deployed my trump card. "Look, can we just be realistic about this for a second? We never said we were exclusive. We never had that conversation. Technically, I didn't actually cheat on you because you're not my boyfriend. We never put a label on it." I said the last part with a hint of what I hoped sounded like gentle, rational superiority. He held up a hand, a gesture that was both weary and absolute. For the first time, a flicker of something, not anger but deep, visceral pain, crossed his face. "Stop. Just stop, Kendra." He took a long, slow breath, and the words that came out next were measured, precise, and absolutely devastating. "This isn't about a technicality. It's not about a legal contract or a label. I don't care if you call me your boyfriend, your partner, or the guy you're just seeing. This is about respect. You did that in my professional space, at a work function, in front of my colleagues, my peers, and my superiors. You made a spectacle of me, and you made a spectacle of yourself. You took something I was building, something I thought we were building, and you showed me you value it so little that you'd trade it for a cheap thrill with a guy you barely know." He finally looked me right in the eye, and the emptiness there was terrifying. I can't be with someone I can't trust. I can't be with someone who doesn't respect me or the world I have to navigate. It's that simple. It's a principle. My entire defense, my whole beautiful, logical framework, just crumbled into dust. The loophole wasn't a loophole. It was a landmine I had gleefully jumped on. The calm in his voice was so much worse than shouting. It wasn't the sound of a fight. It was the sound of a conclusion being reached. All I could do was stand there, speechless and cold, as he said, "I'll arrange a time to get my things from your place," turned around and walked out of my apartment and my life without a single backward glance. The moment the door clicked shut, the shock curdled into pure, unadulterated rage. My first thought wasn't regret, it was indignation. How dare he? I snatched my phone and immediately called my best friend, Maya, ready for the wave of sympathy and validation I knew she'd provide. I launched into the story, pacing my apartment like a caged animal, my voice rising with every sentence. And then he just stands there like some kind of stoic robot and gives me this lecture on respect and principles. I ranted, mimicking his calm tone with sarcastic venom. "He's acting like I committed treason. It was a drunk kiss, Maya, one stupid kiss at a boring party. He's blowing this so far out of proportion it's insane." I paused, waiting for the comforting. "Oh my God, he's crazy. You did nothing wrong," that I desperately needed to hear. But the line was silent for a beat too long. "Maya." "I'm here," she said, her voice careful. "Kendra, what did you think was going to happen?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" I thought he'd be pissed, obviously. But we'd talk it out. He'd get over it. People make mistakes. "Okay, but you didn't just kiss a random guy at a bar," she said, and I could hear her choosing her words with frustrating precision. "You kissed his coworker, at his work event, after showing up as his date. Do you not see how that's different?" My anger flared. "Oh, so you're on his side now." "It's the no official label thing, Maya, that's the whole point. He had no right to expect total fidelity." There was a heavy sigh on the other end of the line. "Kendra, stop it. Stop with the technicality bullshit. That's a shield you're using to avoid feeling guilty, and it's not working on me. You know him. You know how much his reputation and his career mean to him. You know he's a black and white kind of guy. What you did was a huge, public slap in the face. No label isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card for being a shitty person. You messed up. Badly." Her words hit me like a bucket of ice water. This wasn't the script. She was supposed to be my ally, my co-conspirator in righteous anger. Instead, she was echoing Mark's cold logic. "Wow," I said, my voice dripping with ice. "Thanks for the support. I'm glad I know who my real friends are." I hung up before she could reply, the injustice burning in my chest. She didn't get it. Nobody got it. I wasn't the villain here. I was the victim of an overreaction, of an impossibly high, uncommunicated standard. I threw my phone onto the couch, the argument with Maya cementing my narrative. I wasn't just wronged by Mark anymore. I was misunderstood by the whole world. A couple of weeks passed in a bitter, self-righteous haze. I'd swing wildly between replaying his final words with fury and drafting long, unsent texts that detailed exactly how unfair he was being. I'd convinced myself it was a matter of time before he'd realize he'd overreacted and come crawling back with an apology. He had too. He texted me on a Tuesday. Not an apology, but a sterile, logistical message. "Hey, I'll be out of my apartment from 7 to 9 tonight if you want to get the rest of your things. The spare key is under the mat." The politeness of it was more insulting than any angry rant would have been. When I let myself into his apartment that evening, the silence was suffocating. It was so clean, so orderly, exactly as he'd left it. My stuff was neatly piled in a single box on the kitchen counter. My favorite mug, the charger I always forgot, a sweatshirt. It was a sad little collection of my presents in his life, all packed up and ready for disposal. I wandered into his home office to grab a book I'd left on his nightstand. And that's when I saw it. Sitting on the corner of his meticulously organized desk, next to a stack of work papers, was a single printed sheet. It was a reservation confirmation from a travel website. My eyes scanned the details, my brain slowly processing the information. It was for a long weekend at a ridiculously charming seaside cabin in Carmel by the Sea. The check-in date was for next month, my birthday weekend. My breath caught in my throat. All the air seemed to leave the room. This wasn't a casual, last-minute plan. This was something he had researched, chosen, and booked. This was a statement. This was a future. The man who refused to use the word boyfriend, the man I had written off as rigid and unromantic, had been quietly, methodically planning the most thoughtful and romantic birthday trip for me. He wasn't avoiding commitment. He was building it, brick by solid, dependable brick, in the only way he knew how. In that single moment, the entire fortress of my anger, my justifications, my precious loophole, was leveled. It wasn't just a kiss. It wasn't a technicality. I hadn't just broken an unwritten rule. I had taken a sledgehammer to his quiet, earnest, carefully constructed plans for us. The confirmation slip felt like a tombstone, marking the death of something I hadn't even realized was truly alive. Tonight, I'm out with a different group of friends, the ones who don't challenge you, the ones who just pour more wine and agree that all men are trash. I'm holding court, a half-full glass of Sauvignon Blanc in my hand, my voice a little too loud, a little too bright. "Honestly, it's a relief," I declare, punctuating the statement with a dramatic laugh. He was so rigid, so boring, I feel like I can finally breathe again. Seriously, good riddance. My friends nod and murmur in agreement. "You're better off," one of them says, topping off my glass. "His loss, girl, total loss." I raise my glass in a toast. "To freedom," I say, and we all clink our glasses together. I'm playing the part of the liberated, unbothered woman, and I think I'm even convincing myself. But later, in the back of the Uber home, the performance ends. The city lights smear past the window, and the alcohol-fueled bravado evaporates, leaving a cold, hollow ache in its place. I pull out my phone, my thumb hovering over his name and my contacts. The profile picture is gone, replaced by a gray, anonymous silhouette. He really did block me everywhere. I click on our old message thread anyway, scrolling up past the sterile final texts to the last time things were normal. To the last good morning. And as the car glides through the silent, sleeping streets, I just stare at that stupid, cheerful little smiley face. And the tears I'd been holding back all night finally start to fall, hot and silent, onto the cold glass screen.